Thank you so much. It's really wonderful to be here. This is a story that I think may be familiar to some of you. It's from an old Scottish ballad called Tamlin. Her name was Janet. She was the Earl of Cotterhall's daughter. She was wild and willful. She was high-spirited and headstrong, and she'd given her father most of the gray hairs he had. Yet and still, she was the apple of his eye. And he was watching her now as she played at chess with some of the other women of the castle. They were talking about Cotterhall Wood. Cotterhall Wood is haunted, don't you know? It's under the power of the elfin knight Tam Lin, and he'll demand a ransom of anyone who enters the wood. Why, of a man, he'll take his gold or horses, and of a woman, he'll take far more than that. Malarkey, said Janet. There's no such thing. Why, the Earl of Cotterhall is my father, and the wood of Cotterhall will be mine one day. I've ridden the length and breadth of it many a time, and I've never seen hide nor hair of an elfin knight. Well, said one of the old women, perhaps you were not looking for him, hmm? It takes a wee bit of difficulty to see a thing if you're not looking for it. Maybe the next time you go to the wood, you ought to keep your eyes open. Well, Janet thought about that, and she said, maybe I will. Maybe I will go back to Cotterhall Wood, just for the purpose of looking for this elfin knight you're talking about. And then her father spoke up, and he said, best not to go back to Cotterhall Wood. There's truth enough in what's been spoken here. I urge you not to go back to the wood. And Janet thought about that. And she said, well, then maybe I won't. But maybe I will. And they said no more about it. Well, of course, after that, Janet couldn't get Cotterhall Wood out of her mind. And it was only just a few days later that she put on her boots and wrapped a warm wool mantle around her, because it was winter, don't you know? And she set out for the wood. Now, she loved the wood any time of year. And in the winter, with a fresh blanket of new snow and the trees growing up black against the sky, it was lovely to her. It was a bright, clear day, and she wound her way through the trees, really letting her feet lead her, not thinking too much about where she was going. And after a bit, she got to the heart of the wood. And there at the heart of the wood, why, she saw something she'd never seen before. There was a spring that bubbled up and spilled over and made a pool in the middle of the wood there. And there was a great thorn bush growing at the side of it, trailing its long black branches down into the water. And every one of those branches was simply covered with red roses in full bloom, even in the dead of winter. Ah, proof that it's magic, sure, she said. And she went over and plucked a rose. Mm, mm. And then she heard a voice. Who dares to pluck my rose? Who dares to bend my tree? Who dares to come to the heart of the wood without the leave of me? And she turned round right quick and saw the elfin knight Tam Lin standing there. He was as tall as she was. He was dressed all in shimmering green, and he had jet black hair. And though his face was handsome, his skin was dead white, as if he hadna seen the sun in many a year. And his eyes, well, they were dreamier than she thought they might have been. What do you mean? She said to him. How dare I come to the heart of the wood? My name is Janet, and I am the Earl of Cotterhall's daughter. Carter Hall Wood is mine, and I come and go any time I please. I have every right to come to the heart of the wood." "Carter Hall Wood might be yours, Janet," said Tamlin, "but the roses belong to me. And when you plucked that rose, you summoned me. You took something that belonged to me, and now I'm going to ask you for something that belongs to you." And she said, "No, you won't, because there's nothing I have that I want to give you. Nothing at all. And I don't even want this rose. You can have it back." And she threw it right at him, and he caught it. "You're a bold one, you are," he said. "You're a bold one." "So they say," she said to him. "But I'm not any more or less bold than you. For who gave you leave to come to the heart of the wood without the leave of me?" Well, at that, they both started laughing. And as they were laughing, they realized there was a kind of a sparkle between the two of them, don't you know? And so they started talking. And they talked about the wood, they talked about the winter, they talked about the water, they talked about the roses. They talked and talked until finally Janet said, "I think I'd best be going now." And as she turned to leave, Tamlin looked at her and he said, "Will you be back?" And she looked at him and she said, "Maybe I will, but maybe I won't." And they said no more about it. Of course, she couldn't get that encounter out of her mind. And she did want to go back to the wood. And she did want to see Tamlin again and talk to him. He was curious, he was to her. She wanted to know more about him. What was his story? Why did he look so pale? So she went back to the wood. She went back to the wood several more times during the winter and on into the spring. And as they met each other, each time she'd call him, she'd summon him by plucking one of those red roses, because it was always time for the roses. They were always in full bloom. And so they'd walk together in the wood and they'd talk, and every now and again they'd just sit silently and enjoy each other's company. It was early in the summertime when they began to realize they were in love with each other. And so it was that Janet asked Tamlin, "Tamlin, tell me true. Are you really an elfin knight? Or are you only fairy bound?" And he told her he was only fairy bound. He said that he'd been riding out on his milk-white steed one day, and the fairy queen herself had seen him and desired him, fancied him, and so she'd caused a spell to carry him off, him and his steed together, to her realm. And he'd been there ever since. "And tell me, Tamlin, tell me true, do you like it there?" And Tamlin said, "Well, I used to, but not so much anymore. Not since I've met you, Janet." And Janet said, "Well, what can be done about it? How can you leave the fairy realm and come into this life with me?" And he said, "Well, there's nothing I can do about it. You're the one that has to do the doing." "Well, what is it then, Tamlin?" she said. Well, he told her, "On All Hallows Eve, you must come to Miles Cross, there where the river runs deep and dark and wide. You must come to Miles Cross on All Hallows Eve, for that's the night the fairy folk ride out. They'll all be riding out on their black horses and their brown horses, and I ride with them. I'll be riding my milk-white steed. And when you see me, Janet, When you see me, you must reach up and clasp the bridle, and you must pull the rider down. Janet, can you do it? Aye, she said, I can do it. Good, said he, for you must do more. Once you have me on the ground, you must wrap me up in your arms and hold me fast, do not let me go. For the fairies, they will turn me in your arms. They'll turn me from beast to beast and bird to bird. They'll turn me, oh, they'll turn me, and you must not let me go. Janet, can you do it? Aye, I can do it. Good, because you must do more. At the very end, they'll turn me in your arms a burning branch, and it's then you must take and throw me in the river. Throw you in the river, Tamlin, and watch you be carried clean away. Janet, can you do it? I can do it. And so they visited a bit more. And this time, when she left, it was he that plucked a red, red rose and gave it to her. And it was that rose that she came home with and that her father saw. And of course, he asked her, have you been to the wood? Have you seen Tamlin? And she said yes and yes. And he said, and what now? What's to become of you? And she told him about All Hallows Eve and how she was going to win her love away from under the fairies' thrall. And her father said, you'll have my blessing. And so the year moved on, and All Hallows Eve came. And on that night, as in the beginning, Janet put on her boots and her warm wool mantle, for there was a chill in the air. And she bid her father farewell at the door and went on her way under the light of the moon to Miles Cross. Now, if she had turned around, which she didn't, she would have seen her father standing there with his arm raised in blessing for her until he couldn't see her anymore. And along the way, Janet started singing a little song to herself. Oh, Tamlin, Tamlin, it's you I'll win from out of the fairies' thrall. And it's you I'll wed, and it's you I'll bed in the wood of Catterall. So she sang that song as she went to Miles Cross. And when she got there, well, it wasn't a moment too soon, because she heard the bells and the little drums and the pipes a-playing. And there they came, the whole fairy troop of them, on their black horses and their brown horses, riding right toward her, as though to just swallow her up and knock her over. But she saw the white horse, and it came moving toward her, and she reached up fast and grasped the bridle, and she was lifted up off her feet, but she reached up, and she pulled the rider down. And as soon as Tamlin hit the ground, the fairies let out such a cry. Tamlin! Tamlin! Tamlin's away! Tamlin's away! And then she held on to him with all her might, for indeed they started to turn him in her arms. Oh, now he was a stag, a great bellowing stag, and then he was a boar, and now he was a bear, trying to shake her off. But she hung on and she hung on, and then her hands closed in as though on nothing, and she was afraid that the fairies had spirited him away a second time. But no, as she held her hands close together, she could feel the sting of a wasp, and she knew she had him still, and she kept hanging on as the fairies called out, Tamlin, Tamlin, Tamlin's away, Tamlin's away. Oh, she held him through all those changes. He was raven, he was rook, he was rabbit, he was mole, he was mouse, he was hound, he was wolf, he was fox, and still she held him. And at the very last, he was a burning branch. And she ran stumbling to the river, and she threw him in and fell down on her knees. Oh, there was such a hiss and a cloud of steam. And when it cleared, she saw that lying on the banks of the river was her own true love, Tamlin. And she saw that he was just a mother-naked man. Gone was the suit of shimmering green. And the color in his face? Why, he'd lost that pale white pallor, and he looked, well, he had the color of real life in his face again. And his eyes, when he looked at her, they were clear and focused completely on her. Oh, Janet, he said. And Janet said, Tamlin. And then they heard another voice, Tamlin, Tamlin. And looking up, they saw that standing just above the surface of the river was the elfin queen herself. And she was tall, she was, and she had blue skin, and her long hair and her cloak were just as black and liquid as the river. Tamlin, she said, Tamlin. If I had known last night, Tamlin, what this night now I see, I'd have taken out your pretty grey eyes, put in 2 eyes a tree. Tamlin, Tamlin. If I had known last night, Tamlin, what this night now is known, I'd have taken out your heart of flesh, put in a heart of stone. If I had known last night, Tamlin, what this night is known to me, I'd have paid a tithe 7 times to hell ere you'd been won from me. Janet, Janet, you've stolen away the bonniest night in all my company. Then there was a great rush of sound, and the fairy queen and all the elfin folk, they were sucked away as if by a great wind. And there was nothing left of them at all, except the echo of their cry, Tamlin, Tamlin, Tamlin's away. Janet looked at Tamlin, and she saw that both of them were bruised and bleeding from the struggle. And she leaned down close to him and whispered in his ear, Tamlin, I did it. And he looked at her and said, Aye, my love, you did it. You did it. And me, I'm thinking we should leave them there for a bit on the riverbank, covered with the warm wool mantle under the light of the moon, for they deserve a bit of privacy, don't you think? So I'll say no more about it.